All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the weekly webinar presented by Affinity Federal Credit Union. Today's topic is ID theft prevention. My name is Nicholas Mataliano. I am the Digital Communications Administrator here at Affinity, filling in for Oscar Cordova today. Today's presenter is Veronica Hernandez, Loss Prevention Supervisor here at Affinity. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and the link to watch this presentation again will be shared with you all in a follow-up email that will be sent soon. Also, if you have any questions that you would like to ask during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A option on your panel, and Veronica will be more than happy to address them at the end of the webinar. Perfect.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Once again, my name is Veronica Hernandez. I am the Loss Prevention Supervisor here at Affinity Federal Credit Union. Happy to be here sharing some information, some hopefully good tips and tools that can be used to try and prevent ID theft. If you are ever a victim, what to do, and just things that we're seeing not only here, but across the board in the country, and how to protect your information. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I will start off with certain disclaimers. This information is for informational purposes only and is intended to provide general guidance and does not constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. Each person's circumstances are different and may not apply to a specific information provided. You should seek the advice of a financial professional, tax consultant, and/or legal counsel to discuss your specific needs before making any financial decisions or commitments regarding the matter related to your condition are made. Affinity is not affiliated, nor do they endorse or recommend any of the referenced apps or companies and/or their products or services. Accordingly, Affinity does not take responsibility for the quality, reliability of the product or services offered by these apps or companies. So let's just start off with a phrase that unfortunately sums up what we're here to talk about today. As a young child, my mother told me I could be anyone I wanted to be. Well, turns out the police call that identity theft. And unfortunately, it may be a funny phrase, but it is in fact something that is one of the top crimes in the country. And what is identity theft? We hear it in the news. We might see it in emails as far as our local news and crime boards. But identity theft really is just any misuse of your personal information by another individual for the purpose of obtaining cash or credit and/or goods and services. And how does identity theft happen? Well, it could be in a number of ways. Ones that we commonly see are when an individual uses your name or social security number to establish lines of credit, loans, or accounts that you have not authorized. Unfortunately, once that happens, it's something that it takes a long time to not only clear up, but also it's a hardship to have to monitor day in and day out. But it's a necessary, task to do, because if something happens and you see it, you can get right on it to try and resolve it, stop it, close it, and notify the parties that need to be aware of it being identity theft. Unfortunately, when accounts, loans, or lines of credit are established, the thieves are able to access cash, and unfortunately, that could result in a negative account. It could be an outstanding loan. It could be in balances, which will come to you or be brought to you to make right. So that's where the hardship is, having to try and identify or report identity theft to make sure, one, that your information doesn't reflect those loans, those accounts, because you yourself have not requested them. And there's quite a process to try and prove identity theft, which we'll be discussing. But it is something that, even if it happens one time and you catch it, that's great. But many times information can be cycled by perpetrators, by identity theft thieves, and they can be used over and over again because it's your personal identifying information. So it's good information. It's just not an account or a loan or a line of credit requested by you. Other forms of identity theft that we may be more familiar with are fraudulent debit or credit card transactions. It is, in fact, someone claiming to be you, using your plastic card information to perform transactions or cash advances. They may provide your name, even your account information to try and process electronic transactions without your knowledge or consent. And that's why Affinity really supports and encourages members to monitor their accounts, not only here, but at other institutions as well on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes if you're able to catch it right away, it can prevent additional losses from taking place. And sometimes if you have certain allotted funds for bills, checks, payments, the last thing you want to worry about is having to scramble to make sure that those get honored when there's unauthorized or fraudulent activity with your card or account information. It's always important if you see something like that, if you notice a transaction you're not familiar with, to reach out to get additional information. If it's something you don't recognize, maybe it's just coming in with a different name, but if it's identified as something you don't recognize, you did not authorize, then it's imperative that you reach out to Affinity or the other financial institutions right away to make sure that we can dispute those and reject them as soon as possible. How do thieves obtain your information? Well, unfortunately, some of these are quite old, but they are still a way that information is being compromised. Dumpster diving, you think that throwing out junk mail or documents with sensitive information might not matter because it's in the garbage, but it's still a common way that thieves are able to access your information. Skimming. If you ever use an ATM or even use your card at certain merchants, it's possible that their point of sale devices where you swipe your card or insert your card has some sort of a skimming device which is able to collect your card information. They may then try to use that card or account information at another merchant to try and get funds or satisfy a payment on their end with your information. Phishing, spyware, and hacking. We've seen an uptick in this. There could be pop-ups on your screen saying that there's been a compromise, or you could get a text message that looks similar to other communications, maybe from organizations. It could even be an email. The thing to remember is be vigilant of where these requests are coming from. Unfortunately, while the internet is a great way to communicate and reach out and find additional information, it's also a possible way of compromise. Make sure that you're looking at the emails. Are they addressed to you personally? Are they coming from an email address that you recommend? If you receive a phone number, make sure not to trust in the name that it comes through as it may possibly be someone just spoofing the number, meaning it'll show up on your screen one way, even though it's not really coming from there. Unsecured mailboxes, always super important to make sure that if you are receiving sensitive mailers or if you're sending out sensitive information through the mail, you want to make sure that your mailboxes are secured, or maybe you have that additional peace of mind of going in person to the post office to drop off any sort of correspondence. Unfortunately, there's also personal identifying information that is possibly not secured through agencies or merchants, anyone that you're doing business with. That's why it's so important to really know who you're doing business with, making sure that you're doing your due diligence when providing them sensitive information so that it's not compromised. I know personally I've received a number of mailers where they might advise that, we had a breach. So it's possible that your information could be compromised. Many times they may even offer you additional security or monitoring just in case something happens. My biggest thing is if there's a way or some sort of program or offer that is available to you to add additional monitoring to your information, to do so. It's never a bad thing to be notified of any sort of inquiries or applications that are submitted with your information. It might be a hardship to remove freezes on your information, but in the long run, it allows you the control on who can review or submit an application with your information. With agencies or departments where you provide sensitive information, you really have to trust that they're doing their due diligence in being able to secure that information. So be on the lookout for different tactics for individuals trying to reach out to you to get sensitive information. And if at any point you feel uncomfortable or it's too much information or it just doesn't make sense for the reason that you're being contacted or asked for that information, I always say stop. Review who you're speaking with, or you reach out personally to confirm that you're really working with uh, confirmed employees or representatives of organizations before providing any sensitive information. Again, because it might just be one thing that may be given to the perpetrators, but with that, they can continue to try and try and try and collect additional information, which can ultimately lead to identity theft. A little more on dumpster diving. Again, any sort of mailers, whether it's a promotion or a monthly statement, any sort of solicitation that you receive, we always encourage to shred the documents before throwing out. This way, it's not information that could be easily read off of the documents once it's thrown out. We certainly encourage enrollment in e-statements. That way, you no longer have a paper trail as far as a physical document at your home or available to someone else to access that information. Remember that there are securities in place to try and prevent e-statements from being compromised. Consider that many financial institutions require a thumbprint or a verification call or text message in order to grant access to your accounts or sensitive information. Uh, be aware that those messages, those texts, those communications are set as a second level of security to protect your information. Consider them for what they're worth, which is a significant security to prevent someone other than yourself from accessing your information. So if you ever get a text message that you didn't request, or you get an email about some sort of attempt to access your accounts, reach out. Make sure that we can validate it. Make sure that it's something that you recognize. Best to raise your hand when something doesn't seem right than letting it go or ignoring the email and then something else happens. And this is just not at an institution, a financial institution, but any sort of company that you may be doing business with or that you deal with on a regular basis with sensitive information. Shoulder surfing. Definitely something that we may not think of, especially nowadays. You know, we're not really standing close to one another as much, but it still happens. Be aware of where you're performing these ATM transactions. Is someone hovering over your shoulder trying to collect information? Is someone standing there too long? Is it always necessarily them trying to collect information? No, but it's always so important to be aware of who's around you when you're accessing your accounts. We certainly always recommend that you use private devices such as laptops or phones to access your accounts and to be cautious when trying to access them through public devices or in public places like cyber cafes or libraries. Uh, Keeping these things in mind when you're accessing your accounts or other products or services with other merchants with sensitive information will allow at least anyone around you from collecting information. Skimmers. Unfortunately, it is something that is still uh, alive and well and being used by fraudsters. Remember that when you're using an ATM, look at the machine. If it looks bulkier, something is standing out more, it looks like it's not really, really stuck in there. It's movable, it's adjustable. That's not the way that an ATM should operate. So be aware when you're using them that there is no skimmer attached to it. I always recommend doing a search on YouTube about skimmers, and they'll break it down for you step by step on what it looks like, what it could appear like when something isn't really fixed onto the ATM, how to tell if there's a skimmer attached or not. And remember that many times these ATMs are not necessarily monitored. So, of course, it's possible that someone could put something on those ATMs, which then collects your card information. And of course, what do we need to enter as well as our card? Our PIN. So it's always important to be aware of not only around you, but the machines that you're using to perform these transactions. If you see any unauthorized activity, whether it's ATM withdrawals or any sort of transactions on your debit or credit cards, report them immediately. We want to make sure that not only do we secure the card information to prevent any additional fraudulent activity from taking place, but we want to make sure that we're able to credit you in a timely fashion to make sure that you're not inconvenienced as well. Keep in mind, if you go to a restaurant, you normally hand over your card, but you're not always aware of what's happening with that card when they walk away. Always good to review the transactions of the receipts that you're provided when your card is returned to you when you're signing off on those transactions. Affinity has a great card application that will actually send you live notifications the moment that your card is swiped, and you can choose a dollar amount. I personally have that set at 0 because anytime it's swiped, whether it's for the amount that I've authorized or not, I will receive a notification. And that real-time monitoring gives me the confidence to know and also on the spot remind me that this is something that I've authorized. Might be a little bit harder to remember those transactions down the line. So it's just an additional reminder or notification that you can confirm that's an okay transaction or it's not. An additional feature, just a side note on the card application, is that you can actually freeze your card. So if you do see something that you don't recognize, you're able to stop any sort of transactions and thus any additional fraudulent activity from taking place with that card information. Phishing. Never respond to requests that ask you for personal information over the internet. This is something, again, that we've especially seen recently. Unfortunately, it could be in the form of a pop-up or an email or a text message asking for sensitive information. Again, if you are not certain of who you're speaking with, even if it looks similar to previous communications to you from them, I always recommend make sure that you're making the call, that you're calling the phone number on our official website, that you're calling the phone number on the back of your card. These are authorized, known contact numbers to be able to validate information instead of just receiving a call and providing sensitive information over the phone. Emails. Again, it may appear that it's coming from a legitimate email, but if you hover over who sent it to you, you should be able to see the email. And just an example, if Amazon is sending you an email, it's not going to be from an @Gmail email address. They're a large enough company and they are worldwide where it will not be a personal email set up through Gmail or Yahoo, et cetera, et cetera. Additional features that we've seen on phishing via email is that it might just say, "Dear customer." Usually, emails to customers are personalized. So it could be to Mr. Smith or Ms. Hernandez. That information will be specific to you instead of general. You should always feel secure before providing any sort of sensitive information. In fact, we encourage, if we ever reach out to members, please contact us at the 800 number or at the number that you know best to reach out to Affinity Federal Credit Union. And that way you have the confidence that you are working with someone that is known and with the organization you're dealing with. Spyware. When you're connected to the internet, you always have that risk, right? Make sure that you have firewalls or anti-spyware programs on your computer. Why? Because if even there's an attempt, it should be able to notify you. It can also run scans on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that nothing has been downloaded to your device that is not legitimate software. It's Trojan programs. It's something that you may not see or know that is on your device, and that's the hard part to try and fight against or prevent. But here's what to remember. Trojan programs are many times employed by cyber thieves and hackers to try and gain access to user systems. So it's not just one web page or one program, but it could also be the documents that you have saved on your computer device. And while you may just think that resetting a username and password is the quickest resolution, keep in mind that there could still be Trojan programs that are on your device, and that could possibly monitor any emails coming in or going out, what web pages are visited, and they can actually transmit keystrokes, meaning that if you enter your new password or any sort of PIN to access certain services, they may be able to see that as well. So it's always important. You want to prevent any sort of spyware on your device. So it's always good to have some sort of protection or anti-spyware program on your computer, on your phone, and that you run it on a daily basis or as often as you possibly can to prevent against that. Mail theft. It's something that is still happening. You can try and reduce, as I mentioned earlier, that from happening by delivering your postage directly to the post office or dropping it at a drop box. We necessarily don't know who's walking by your home when you put a letter in your mailbox and if it's going to be the appropriate person to grab that letter. So it's always important to try and secure as far as correspondence like checks, if you're mailing out bills of any sort, or any sort of sensitive information to an organization, to try and minimize that risk by taking it directly to the post office or putting it into a drop box, which makes it inaccessible to any third parties. Unfortunately, residential mail slots are often more secure than non-locking post mounts or wall mount mailboxes. What does that mean? Well, that no one can just walk on by to try and pick up any mail that you have waiting there. They'd really have to try and stay there for quite a period of time and try and get something in to pull the mail out. And I think I'm with anyone else that if someone's standing or hovering or, at a mailbox or a mail slot for a long period of time, they might get another look over for a little bit longer, just in case, because it's not normal activity. Again, it's that conscientious review of those around you, of making sure you know who's around you, what they're doing, be aware of your surroundings. But again, these are ways that you can minimize any sort of personal identifying information from being stolen, which could result in identity theft. So this is a lot of stuff to worry about and a lot of ways that we can communicate with each other on a day-to-day basis. But what's the good news? Well, we've seen that federal regulations have begun to address concerns about identity theft. So how does that make this a little bit easier for you to defend yourself from identity theft? Well, there are means that you have to protect yourself. It also allows you the ability to dispute any sort of inquiries or credits that are on your information, on your reports. It also allows you to place fraud alerts on your credit report or on your check systems report. So should someone try and establish those types of accounts or products with your information, the first thing that they will see, the person or the underwriter reviewing those applications, is that there's a freeze. So we cannot move forward until it's removed. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, having that control, having that notification so that you yourself can say, yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay, will really go a long way. Because if something doesn't get opened, it's a little bit easier for cleanup as far as being an identity theft victim. So what's the best way to defend yourself against this? Review your personal credit score on a regular basis. Remember, you can actually get a free credit report every year from all the major credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Consider adding a freeze to your credit reports, like I said, so that way, if someone did try to apply for something with your information, there would be a freeze on there that would need to be removed before moving forward. An added point that isn't on here is check systems. If someone tries to open an account with your information, that would be able to prevent from the account being established without you removing that freeze on your check systems report. And although you might see why it may be important not to have a credit card open in your information, same thing goes for checking accounts or savings accounts, because let's say the account is then drawn negative by a perpetrator, then unfortunately it becomes you who has to satisfy the account, which is why if you have a freeze on there and you can prevent them from opening those accounts, that would be the best option. Sign up for free credit monitoring. Credit Karma is a common one, but there's plenty of those out there where it will let you know whenever your score goes up or your score goes down, or any sort of soft inquiries that may happen with your information. Again, knowledge is power. If you know when there is an inquiry that you did not consent to, that you did not authorize, that you maybe have never done business with those organizations that are pulling those inquiries, then you can reach out to go ahead and flag them as not authorized. I can let you know that if you are a victim of identity theft, I would suggest filing a police report. The reason why is because if there's a documentation of that happening, it's on the books, it's on the record. And if something happens later on, not just in that one instance, you have proof that you've been a victim of it before as well. It's also generally something that's asked by financial institutions to prove identity theft. If you're a member of the credit union and you have been a victim of identity theft, we do partner with CyberScout. One of the great things about them is that they really walk you through on a step-to-step basis on how to add a freeze to your credit report, how to add a freeze to your check systems report, how to monitor your information on your credit report, how to request that information, and how to dispute them. I think I can speak for everyone that in a stressful, high stress situation of identity theft, having someone walk you through step by step will go a long way to get it all resolved. And it's something that we offer our members at no charge if they are a victim of identity theft. The Federal Trade Commission also has a identity theft template or submission that you can put through if you are a victim of identity theft. Again, just like with the police report, the identity theft report from the FTC is just something that you can provide together to institutions where there have been applications with your information. And they go a long way to try and clean up any sort of inquiries that you may have on your reports and in closing accounts that you have not requested. It also is a way to document that that crime has taken place. So if there's any way, shape, or form that law enforcement can try and find the culprits, it's documented, just like with the police report with the FTC. Thank you so much for all of your time, and let's see if we have some questions here. Looks like we have two questions here. The first one, it looks like if you were a victim of identity theft, what is the first line of defense? I would say the immediate first thing you should do is report it wherever it's taken place. If it's at a financial institution, you want to reach out right away. That way, your accounts, wherever the compromise has taken place, is frozen. And that way we can establish new accounts if that's the case, and we can go through the process of filing a police report or filing an FTC report, and then also connecting you over to CyberScout to try and make sure that freezes are put in place for other attempts that may take place. So I would say reporting it is the very first thing you should do. Are the free credit monitoring services like Credit Karma legit safe? That's a great question. I would say that for that, it depends on how you use them, right? And what I mean by that is each of those sites, they have certain security in place, whether it's a username and password. You can have codes or email verification codes sent to you before they are accessed, and also not, let's say, saving your credentials, because there's a risk to that. If someone else is somehow able to access your device or your phone, then it's something that we want to make sure that they're not able to log in with you. Another thing in addition to that is that sites like Credit Karma also promote different services like credit cards or loans. So it's not something that you would want someone else to access as well. So I would say as a user, just being aware, not saving credentials, it's something that you can use. And as long as you are aware that there is that risk that that information or credentials can be compromised, that you don't leave it anywhere, you don't leave it on devices that you normally log in from. And that way you can minimize any sort of fraud that could take place through those sites. So really just keeping your information safe, not sharing that information. That's how you can make sure that when you use those sites, you are not compromised. Another question I had was, would you suggest freezing your credit until you expect to apply for a credit? I personally do. And it's mostly, like I said, having that control. When you have that control where you can say when someone can submit or pull a credit report or pull an inquiry for check systems, it allows no one but yourself to allow that. And I think that it's always good to prevent instead of waiting should something happen. It's certainly a lot easier to be notified that something's happening and prevent it from actually getting opened than once you know that there's an application or something gets opened, trying to clean it up. So prevent it, not just react to it. Let's see here. I have another question. I heard you can get a free report from Experian more than once per year during the pandemic. Have you heard this? I have not heard that, but I know that in certain instances, especially with ID theft, if you have a police report, you may be able to pull that information and review it to secure your information. Whether you see something, especially during the pandemic when many of us were remote, that will certainly help. Other than checking your credit report annually, is it worth paying for credit monitoring? You know what? I think that's on a individual opinion, a individual basis. The reason is, we've have plenty of members who have talked to me about how great certain monitoring services are. They certainly feel confident knowing that they will call them or contact them should something unusual happen. I can't speak for any particular credit monitoring, but again, it does not hurt to have those controls in place because you prevent it instead of react to it. So that's always great. How does a VPN better protect you from bad guys accessing your computer? That's a great question. One of the things that I will say is that if they are somehow trying to access your device, being able to have them not go through any sort of internet service or provider will be able to secure your information better. What I mean by that is if somehow there is some sort of virus on your computer device, that they have it on there and they're able to track your internet connection, they would be able to try and monitor all of the devices connected to it. So a VPN is just that, it's a secure connection where they won't know where you're logging in from, what devices are being accessed. It allows them not to be able to pinpoint where you access accounts, sites, information from. If they're not able to track it, then that makes it a much harder process for them to try and access your information. Hopefully that answers your question. Please let me know if you have a follow-up to that. Let's see, and we have a suggestion. Can Affinity have the name Affinity FCU tagged with their security? My debit card was declined because the bank thought my card was stolen. I was traveling. The bank called me, but I didn't answer since I was receiving a lot of telemarketing calls. Well, that is a great suggestion. I will absolutely submit that. And certainly that kind of goes a long way with what we were talking about phone calls, right? If you don't recognize them, then, you may not call them. I don't know about you, but I've received an endless amount of calls about my extended warranty for quite some time now. So at this point, if I don't recognize a phone number, then, I'm not probably going to answer. What I will say is this, I would absolutely be happy to submit that suggestion. I will also note that if ever you're having an issue or you're traveling, that card app that I mentioned is a great way to really monitor any sort of alerts and also see the most recent activity on your card. So that way, if you have an issue or if they think something is flagging as unusual, you'll be able to reach out, review to see if the card is active, place a hold if anything, and then also reach out to our contact center to validate transactions if necessary. But I will absolutely be happy to submit that suggestion. Thank you so much. And did anyone else have any additional questions for me? Oh, I do. We have one more. Do you encounter a lot of identity thefts with Affinity members? You know what? I'll say this much because I am part of numerous organizations between financial institutions. We see it across the board, not just Affinity members, but all types of customers at other institutions. I don't think it's something that's specific to specific financial institutions, but just across the board. Identity theft is one of those like top 5 crimes that are happening in the country. So it really, no one is safe from it. Everyone can be a victim to it. So while we've seen some of our members be victims of identity theft, I don't think it's very specific to us. Unfortunately, it's just across the board, which is why all these suggestions or these tips are great things to use regardless of where you bank, regardless of who you do business with, because your information being compromised could really just happen anywhere. And did anyone have any additional questions for me today? Well, I appreciate all of your time. And as a parting message, I want to thank all of you for your time today in being here with me for this webinar. I hope that if nothing else, at least you learn one new thing, and that you have this knowledge, this information, and these tools in the forefront to try and prevent identity theft from happening. And if unfortunately you know, a friend or a loved one is a victim of it, that at least you have suggestions or some words of wisdom for them to try and secure that, protect their information moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Veronica, for all that information. And again, there'll be an email sent out soon with the recording of this webinar. Thank you all.